Some engines are just collections of metal. Pistons, cranks, a bit of noise. Forgettable. Then there are engines that are something more. Engines with a soul. Engines that whisper promises of speed, of victory, of sheer unadulterated power. The 446 Gurney Eagle was one of these. It wasn't just designed, it was conjured, born from a need, a desperate, burning need for an American V8 that could not just compete, but utterly annihilate the European sophisticates on their own turf, and then some. This was no polite little motor. It was a brute, a titan, a thundering declaration of intent. The late 1960s, a golden era for motorsport. But for American V8s in certain arenas, it was a time of, let's call it, needing a bit more grunt. Dan Gurney, a man who knew a thing or two about speed, saw the gap. He didn't just see a gap, he saw a chasm, a place where a truly revolutionary V8 could plant its flag. The 446 was his answer. It wasn't an evolution of existing technology, oh no. This was a reinvention. It featured a radical new cylinder head design, materials previously only whispered about in aerospace, and an internal architecture that promised biblical levels of horsepower. It was quite simply ahead of its time, too far ahead perhaps. Imagine the scene. Gurney, probably pacing, ideas sparking like a faulty distributor. He needed something that breathed differently, something that screamed louder. The 446 was designed to be lighter than its rivals, yet stronger. More compact, yet capable of displacing a monstrous 7.3 litres or 446 cubic inches for those of you who speak American. It was designed to rev higher, punch harder and last longer than anything Ford, or anyone else for that matter, had ever bolted into a racing chassis. This engine wasn't just about winning races, it was about rewriting the rule book on what a V8 could achieve. The initial whispers were of numbers that seemed impossible, horsepower figures that would make a Saturn V rocket blush, torque that could restart a dead planet. This wasn't just an engine, it was a legend in the making. Even before the first prototype coughed into life, it represented a dream of ultimate performance, a testament to what happens when brilliant minds are unshackled and told to build the best. The very air around its development crackled with anticipation. A sense that something truly special, something game-changing, was about to be unleashed upon an unsuspecting world. If only the world and Ford had been ready. Dan Gurney. The name alone conjures images of speed, of daring, of that uniquely American blend of ingenuity and sheer bloody-mindedness. He wasn't just a driver, he was a force of nature. Tall, handsome, impossibly talented behind the wheel of pretty much anything with an engine, Formula One, IndyCar, NASCAR, Le Mans. He conquered them all. He was the first driver to win in all 4 major categories. Think about that. It's like being a world champion in boxing, golf, tiddlywinks and synchronized swimming, all at the same time. That was Gurney, a proper hero, but driving fast cars, even winning in them, wasn't enough for Dan. Oh no, he had bigger ideas. He wanted to build them too. He founded All American Racers, or AAR. The name said it all. He dreamt of American cars, designed by Americans, powered by American engines, winning on the world stage. His Eagle race cars were and still are things of beauty. Sleek, innovative, and often very, very fast. Gurney wasn't just a racer, he was an innovator, an engineer at heart, always pushing the boundaries, always looking for that unfair advantage. His vision for the 446 Gurney Eagle engine was an extension of this ambition. He didn't want to just borrow power from the big manufacturers, tweak it a bit, and hope for the best. He wanted something bespoke, something that bore his DNA, something that would be unequivocally, devastatingly his. He saw the potential for a large displacement, high-revving V8 that could be versatile, powerful enough for Can-Am, reliable enough for endurance racing, and sophisticated enough to take on the best in the world. This engine was meant to be the heart of his American racing dynasty. Gurney understood engines. He wasn't just some leadfoot who pointed the car and mashed the loud pedal. He understood the physics, the metallurgy, the black arts of making internal combustion sing. He knew what he wanted, and he knew how to articulate it to the engineers who could bring his vision to life. The 446 was his magnum opus in engine terms, a project driven by his relentless pursuit of perfection and his unwavering belief that American engineering could and should be the best on the planet. He poured his heart, his soul, and a considerable amount of his own credibility into it. No great enterprise is ever a solo flight, not even for a genius like Dan Gurney. To bring the monstrous 446 Gurney Eagle to life, he needed partners, and he found them in some rather interesting places. First, there was Harry Westlake. If you know anything about cylinder heads, you know Westlake. The man was a god of airflow, a sorcerer of combustion. He could coax horsepower out of an engine block the way a snake charmer coaxes a cobra from a basket. Gurney knew that if his V8 was going to breathe properly, if it was going to make the insane power he envisioned, Westlake was the man to call. Then there was Ford, specifically Ford's Cleveland engine plant. Now, Ford and Gurney had a history. A good one, mostly. Gurney had delivered Ford their first Le Mans victory with A.J. Foyt in the GT40, so there was respect, there was understanding. Ford's Cleveland facility was known for producing some serious V8 muscle, big blocks that could move mountains, or at least very large American muscle cars. The idea was to leverage Ford's production might and casting expertise, combining it with Westlake's head magic and Gurney's overarching vision, an ambitious cocktail to say the least. The collaboration was, as you can imagine, not always smooth sailing. You had Gurney, the driven racer constructor, wanting perfection and performance above all. You had Westlake, the meticulous British engineer, obsessed with gas flow and volumetric efficiency. And then you had the Ford contingent, the corporate types, thinking about costs, production lines, and how this beast might fit into their broader, often bewildering, corporate strategy. It was like trying to get a rock band, a classical orchestra, and a group of accountants to write a symphony together, one Ford insider supposedly quipped. But when it clicked, boy, did it click. Despite the potential for clashes, the early days were filled with a palpable excitement. Blueprints flew back and forth across the Atlantic. Prototypes were cast. Ideas were debated, refined, and sometimes thrown out with considerable force. The Cleveland engineers, initially perhaps a little skeptical of this racer's dream, soon caught the bug. They saw the elegance in Westlake's designs, the sheer audacity of Gurney's ambition. They were building something special, something that wasn't just another iteration of the venerable Ford 5.8. This was different. This was a Gurney Eagle, and it was going to be spectacular. The manufacturing process for the 446 Gurney Eagle was less mass production, more bespoke artistry. This wasn't an engine destined to be churned out by the thousands for sensible family saloons. Each component was scrutinized, measured, and often hand-finished. The engine block itself, a special lightweight casting from Ford's Cleveland foundry, was just the beginning. The real magic lay in the details, the tolerances, the exotic materials that Gurney and Westlake insisted upon. We're talking about alloys and treatments that were more at home in an Apollo mission than a typical V8. Mechanics who got their hands on the early prototypes were said to be in awe. You'd take the rocker covers off, one seasoned race mechanic recalled, and it was like looking at a Swiss watch, only angrier. Everything was just right, polished, precise. You could tell this thing was built to do serious business, not just make noise. The cylinder heads, pure Westlake genius, were things of beauty, with ports so perfectly sculpted you'd think Michelangelo had a hand in them. They allowed the big V8 to breathe in a way few engines of its size ever could, promising a torrent of power at stratospheric revs. The sheer power density was astonishing. From its 446 cubic inches, the engine was rumoured to be capable of consistently producing well over 700 horsepower, with some insiders suggesting it could be tuned for much, much more. And this was in an era when 500 horsepower was considered godlike. The torque figures were equally eye-watering, enough to rip tarmac from the very surface of the earth. When the first few engines were finally assembled and fired up on the dyno, the sound was apparently enough to make grown men weep. Not from sadness, but from sheer, unadulterated mechanical ecstasy. It was a roar that promised domination. We'd never seen anything like it, a Ford Cleveland engineer who wished to remain anonymous reportedly said. We built big, tough engines, sure, but this Gurney Westlake thing, it was on another level. It was refined yet brutal. It spun up so fast the dyno struggled to keep up. There were a few hushed conversations in the corridors, wondering if we, or anyone, really knew what we were unleashing. It had that feel about it, like a caged animal that was far too powerful for its enclosure. The excitement was infectious, but so too, perhaps, was a dawning sense of trepidation in certain quarters. Section 5. Unleashed fury, the Eagle dominates, then vanishes. When the 446 Gurney Eagle finally hit the track, nestled within the chassis of one of Dan Gurney's beautiful Eagle racing cars, the effect was immediate and electrifying. Initial tests were stunning. The engine didn't just perform, it obliterated expectations. Drivers reported a wave of relentless torque that seemed to have no end, combined with a willingness to rev that was utterly uncharacteristic for such a large displacement V8. It was, by all accounts, a weapon, a beautifully engineered, meticulously crafted weapon, ready to take on the world. And for a brief, glorious period, it did. In the series where it was allowed to compete, often in Gurney's own Can-Am cars or specialized sports races, the 446 Eagle was a revelation. Victories were racked up with what appeared to be contemptuous ease. Rival teams, running engines from established giants, could only watch in bewildered dismay as the Gurney-powered Eagles simply drove away from them. It was like they had an extra gear, an extra 100 horsepower we just couldn't find, one rival crew chief lamented at the time. The engine's reliability, a testament to its robust design and quality construction, was also remarkable, especially for such a high-performance unit. One famous story tells of a qualifying session where Gurney himself, just to see what the engine could really do, supposedly turned up the wick a little. The result was a lap time so far ahead of the competition, it was initially dismissed as a timing error. It wasn't. The engine was that good. It had the power, the soundtrack and the man behind it to become a true legend. For a fleeting moment it seemed like Gurney's dream of all-American dominance powered by his own V8 masterpiece was not just achievable, but inevitable. The future looked bright, loud and incredibly fast. But then things started to get complicated. Just as the 446 Gurney Eagle was hitting its stride, just as it was proving its world-beating potential, the landscape began to shift. The engine, despite its on-track heroics, found itself facing headwinds from unexpected directions. Its appearances became more sporadic. Development, which should have been accelerating, started to slow. The thundering roar of the 446, which had promised to echo through motorsport for years to come, began to fade, replaced by confusing silence and a growing sense of unease. What on earth was going on? Section 6. Whispers in the boardroom, Ford's shifting gears and growing fears. While the 446 Gurney Eagle was tearing up the tarmac, a different kind of race was being run in the hushed, carpeted corridors of Ford's headquarters. A race of budgets, of marketing strategies, of internal politics. And in this race, raw horsepower and on-track victories weren't always the winning factors. Ford, you see, was a colossal company. A giant with many arms, many priorities, and sometimes a bafflingly short attention span when it came to niche, high-performance projects that didn't fit neatly into their grand, global plans. This wasn't necessarily malicious, just corporate. The late 1960s and early 1970s were a time of change for the automotive industry. New emissions regulations were looming. The muscle car boom was showing signs of peaking. Fuel crises were on the horizon. Ford executives, men in grey suits who worried more about profit margins than pole positions, started to look at projects like the Gurney Eagle with a more critical and perhaps nervous eye. This engine was expensive, it was specialized, and crucially, it wasn't a mainstream Ford product they could sell in millions of Mustangs or Torinos. It was Dan Gurney's baby, albeit one with Ford components. There was a definite shift in attitude, a former Ford engineer connected to the project allegedly stated years later. Initially, there was enthusiasm. We had helped Gurney win Le Mans, and this looked like another world beater. But then the bean counters started asking questions. What's the ROI on this? How does this help sell more Cortinas? They didn't get it. They didn't see the halo effect, the sheer prestige. They saw a line item on a spreadsheet that looked a bit too big for their liking. The winds of corporate favor were beginning to blow in a different direction. Furthermore, there might have been another, more subtle fear at play. The 446 Gurney Eagle was too good. It was outperforming, or had the potential to outperform, some of Ford's own flagship racing engines. Could it be that some factions within Ford felt threatened by an engine that, while using some of their parts, was distinctly a Gurney creation? Did they want the glory and the technological bragging rights to remain firmly under the blue oval, rather than being shared with an independent like Gurney, no matter how talented or successful? The whispers started, and they weren't good. Section 7. The cold shoulder treatment: sabotage, politics, or just bad business? As Ford's internal enthusiasm waned, the support for the 446 Gurney Eagle project began to dry up. It wasn't a dramatic public execution, more like a slow, agonizing starvation. Suddenly, obtaining crucial components from Ford's Cleveland plant became more difficult. Development funding, once readily available, was now subject to endless reviews and bureaucratic hurdles. Communications became strained. Gurney, a man used to decisive action and clear objectives, found himself battling not just rival teams on the track, but a growing indifference and perhaps even quiet obstruction from his erstwhile partners. Was it deliberate corporate sabotage? That's a strong accusation, and one that's hard to prove definitively from the outside. Ford, naturally, would never admit to such a thing. They would talk about strategic realignments, budgetary constraints, or shifting market priorities, standard corporate jargon for "we're pulling the plug, but we don't want to look like the bad guys." Yet, for those close to Gurney and the AAR team, the feeling was that the rug had been pulled out from under them. The engine was a proven winner, so why kill it? Dan Gurney, ever the fighter, didn't take this lying down. He pushed, he argued. He tried to find alternative sources for components, alternative funding. He believed in the 446. He knew what it was capable of. He had invested so much of himself into its creation. Dan felt betrayed. No doubt about it. A close associate was quoted as saying he delivered for Ford before, and he thought this engine was going to be another triumph for both of them. To see it sidelined for reasons that seemed more about internal Ford politics than performance, it was a bitter pill to swallow. The official explanations, when they came, were vague and unsatisfactory. Talk of focusing on other engine programs of the changing face of motorsport. But for many observers, and certainly for Team Gurney, it felt like a monumental opportunity squandered. The 446 Gurney Eagle wasn't just another engine program, it was special. It had the potential to dominate for years, to become an iconic piece of American motorsport history. Instead, it was being quietly ushered towards the shadows, a victim, perhaps, of being too good, too independent, or simply born at the wrong time in Ford's corporate life cycle. Section 8. Silence Thunder: How Ford Pulled the Plug on a Masterpiece. The end for the 446 Gurney Eagle as a Ford-supported project wasn't marked by a single dramatic announcement. There was no press conference declaring its demise. Instead, it was a slow fade. The supply of essential engine blocks and specialized parts from Ford's Cleveland facility, which were crucial for the engine's construction, dwindled from a trickle to a complete halt. Without these core components, building new 446 engines, or even reliably servicing the existing handful, became an almost impossible task for Dan Gurney's all-American racers. Ford had effectively and quietly turned off the life support. Gurney's plans for the engine were ambitious and far-reaching. He envisioned it powering not just his Can-Am Challengers, but potentially Indy cars and even high-performance road cars bearing the Eagle brand. A true American supercar powered by a true American world-beating V8. It was a tantalizing prospect. The engine's design, with its relatively compact size for its massive displacement and power, made it surprisingly versatile. Ford's withdrawal of support shattered these dreams. The limited number of 446 engines already built became prized, almost mythical artifacts, rather than the vanguard of a new performance dynasty. The official line from Ford, if pressed, would likely have been about focusing their resources on their mainstream engine programs, like the upcoming 351 Cleveland variants or their big block 429S. These were engines destined for mass production, for cars that would sell in showrooms across America. The Gurney Eagle, for all its brilliance, was a niche product, a high-cost, low-volume exotic. In the cold, hard light of corporate accounting, its numbers probably didn't add up for the Ford executives making the final decisions, especially as the regulatory environment for high-performance engines began to tighten. The impact on Gurney and AAR was significant. A huge amount of time, effort and financial investment had gone into the 446 project. To see it cut short, just as it was proving its immense capabilities, was not just a disappointment, it was a major setback. Gurney, ever resilient, would continue to innovate and build incredible racing cars. But the dream of a Gurney-designed and Gurney-powered dynasty, spearheaded by the mighty 446, was effectively silenced by the very corporation that had, for a brief shining moment, helped bring it into existence. The thunder had well and truly been muffled. Section 9. A ghost in the machine, the lingering legend of the lost 446. What became of the handful of 446 Gurney Eagle engines that were actually built? They became the stuff of legend, whispered about in paddocks, revered by collectors. A poignant what-if in the annals of motorsport history. A few may still exist, squirreled away in private collections, perhaps even occasionally roaring to life to remind the world of their awesome potential. But the grand vision of hundreds of these powerhouses dominating racetracks globally, that dream died with Ford's decision. The engine became a ghost, a spectacular phantom of American engineering brilliance. The unanswered questions linger even today, decades later. What if Ford had fully backed the 446 Gurney Eagle? Could it have gone on to become one of the most dominant racing engines of all time? Mentioned in the same breath as the Cosworth DFV or the Offenhauser, could Gurney have built his road-going supercar? An American Ferrari slayer powered by this incredible V8? We'll never know for sure. But the tantalizing glimpses of its performance suggest that the potential was truly enormous. It was an engine that deserved a far greater destiny than the one it received. The legacy of the 446 Gurney Eagle is therefore one of both triumph and tragedy. A triumph of engineering vision, a collaboration that for a time produced something truly world-class, but also a tragedy of corporate short-sightedness, of potential unfulfilled. It stands as a powerful reminder that in the high-stakes world of motorsport and automotive manufacturing, genius and performance are not always enough. Sometimes the bean counters, the marketing departments, and the shifting sands of corporate strategy hold the ultimate power. They can silence even the most magnificent thunder. And so, the 446 Gurney Eagle remains racing's lost legend, a testament to Dan Gurney's incredible ambition and the engineering prowess of his team and collaborators. It's a story that makes you wonder, that makes you dream of what might have been. If you ever hear a particularly deep, angry V8 roar in the distance, a sound that seems to shake the very foundations of the earth, just maybe it's the ghost of the 446 Gurney Eagle, reminding us of the incredible power that was and the glory that was so tantalizingly close. A truly awesome machine silenced before its time. What a crying shame.